Hello and welcome back to my YouTube channel. What a result for Newcastle yesterday, 3-2 at the City Ground against Nottingham Forest. It's a really interesting game to look back on because a lot of the takeaways actually and a lot of the discourse around the game and during the game is actually quite negative. I mean, there's a lot of discussion around Dan Burn again because of the first goal that Nottingham Forest scored. A lot of talk about Callum Wilson's performance. Obviously, he's gone off with a little bit of a arm injury, which we'll get into in a minute. There's talk of the midfield being overrun again. Lots of similar sort of things, but they've got the victory, and that's 4 victories on the road in a row now, which is amazing considering that they've only won 1 league game on the road all season up until Aston Villa at the end of January. And so things are actually looking up quite a bit. So there's actually a lot to discuss and a lot to get into. But the main positive of is Bruno Guimaraes, and I put on Twitter yesterday that he rarely puts in bad performances, does Bruno, but sometimes he puts in stunning performances that make you realise just how he is actually one of the best midfielders in the world. He's really sets the tone for Newcastle, picks the game up by the scruff of the neck, and just takes them to a different level, all on his own almost. I think that's what happened yesterday. Newcastle were poor, as I say, for long periods. Defensively, they were... Nottingham Forest at times looked like they were going to score with every attack. There's a real issue with their defensive structure when they get turned over in transition, as I've mentioned in this video that I've done on Dan Burn and being exposed without Joe Willock and Joe Linton. I'm sorry to keep going on about it, but it really is very pertinent at the moment because Eddie Howe continues to go that way with and play that sort of open midfield and pressing high and high line. With Burn at the back without Willock and Joe Linton, and that's counterintuitive because you don't have the energy and you don't have the ability to stop the transitions and get the high press and have the intensity and the energy high up, and that leaves Burn, especially against a player like Anthony Elanga with his pace, exposed, and that's what happened with the first goal, but we'll get into that in a second. Bruno, phenomenal all game, obviously opened the scoring with a brilliant volley, but as I say, sometimes you get these games where he just turns up, grabs the game by the scruff of the neck, and proves he's one of the world's best. And I thought yesterday was one of those games, like Southampton in his first season, when he scored his first goal, like Brentford last season, like Norwich in his first season as well. There's a few games that really stand out, and this is one of those. It was when he was most needed yesterday because Newcastle, I don't think without him they would have won that game. There was a lack of energy and pace and attack at times, compared to Nottingham Forest, who are very athletic, very energetic, very pacey, with a lot of players like Callum Hudson-odoi, Elanga, Taiwo Awoniyi as well, and Nuno Tavares at left back. Morgan Gibbs-White, obviously, he went close early on, but at 1-0 Newcastle were in control for about 15 minutes, and then one ball through the midfield, Elanga gets onto it, Dubravka comes out a bit late, Burn is behind him, and it's 1-1, and it was another of those frustrating examples, and you've got to question what Eddie Howe is doing with that sort of thing. And I put on Twitter as that goal went in, Dan Burn isn't going to get any quicker. His limitations are his limitations, and you do have to take the rough with the smooth when he plays at left back. There's obviously things that he brings, and Eddie Howe was very complimentary of him in his pre-match presser, talking about how key he is to the way Newcastle play, and in ways he is, because he goes back into that back three, allows Newcastle to be very solid in theory when they're defending their box, but when players are running at you and at pace like Forest were at times yesterday with Gibbs-White, Elanga and Hudson-odoi, just as they were on Boxing Day, the same thing. It's hard to defend the box anyway, and it almost becomes pointless to have Burn there in the same way, and I think that's what happened at 1-1. Newcastle finally got themselves back in front with Fabian Schär, another goal after his 2 at Villa. You think Newcastle can get to half-time and build, but again, another goal from Callum Hudson-odoi deflected off Louis Miley. And that goal comes about because they're allowed to get close to the box again. Wrong-footed Dubravka, and it's 2-2, and Newcastle have it all to do again. And at that stage, you're kind of a bit worried because, as I say, Forest were getting through at every moment, except Bruno was sort of giving them a foothold. He was dictating the play a little bit, having a bit of fun with a couple of flicks over players. It was one of those games for him, but he was kind of doing it on his own. I said it in that Willock and Joe Linton video, and I felt it a little while as well. I think we're seeing limitations with the Longstaff and Miley partnership. They've both bring very good energy. They're both good at getting around the pitch, but they're not powerful. They're not enforcers. They're not physical presences, and I think that's what Newcastle really lack when they play such such an open formation and open play. And I think people like Bruno need to be protected, and he wasn't, and that was kind of a weakness, I thought, in this game, until Bruno steps up with that fantastic winning goal. Brilliant recognition to win the ball back high up and take it on and find the bottom corner with that brilliant finish. And it really felt like Bruno had a point to prove, both in terms of that he's happy, as what constantly he was saying in his post-match interviews, that he was really happy at Newcastle. Also talk about him leaving, and I think many fans have accepted that he probably will leave in the summer. I think you've seen in this game why he can't just be allowed to leave without a fight. He is so important to Newcastle. It's no surprise that they haven't won without him. Sometimes he is a key cog in a great team performance. Sometimes he takes the game by the scruff of the neck, and that was one of those games where he was absolutely phenomenal by himself. And without him, Newcastle don't win the game. I think that's absolutely fair to say. Lots of talk about that penalty that wasn't for Nottingham Forest. Forest fans saying it was. Some Forest fans I have seen saying it wasn't as well. But I'm not sure it was. I think Newcastle got away with one, certainly, and they got away with one with Awoni's offside goal as well, because they were so open in defence, and Botman was having trouble with Awoni all night. But it's very harsh to say Dubravka touched them. There is one angle that they showed on Match of the Day which does make it look like it could possibly have been a penalty, but I would have been very, very aggrieved if I was Newcastle and that was given. Forest deserved something out of the game, to be honest. I don't think Newcastle were phenomenal. I think there's a lot of lessons. As I say, it's very odd to sort of talk about a victory that comes at a good time form-wise for Newcastle. Newcastle generally look in decent shape, but a lot of the issues that have been plaguing them in recent weeks defensively were on show again, and that's a bit of a worry against when you see that it's not just the top teams that are exposing them anymore. We've seen it with Luton. We've seen it with Forest at St James's Park. We saw it a little bit with Forest last night, and at times it looked like Forest could have taken that victory themselves. Credit to Newcastle for holding on. Credit to Bruno, as I say, for grabbing the game by the scruff of the neck. It was great to see Anthony Gordon fit. Another lie from Eddie Howe, as we've become accustomed to. Made a good impact. Didn't look like he was having any ill effects from that injury, which is great to see. A little bit of a concern, as I say, about Callum Wilson's arm. We'll see how that goes ahead of Bournemouth next week. That's up to 7th, right in the race for the top 6 again. As I said in a video after Manchester City, I'm fairly confident Newcastle will be in that race, even with all their issues. They're only 5 points off where they were at this stage last season. And obviously, the big thing is that they're 11 points off the top 4, which shows that the top of the table is a lot more competitive this season. If they'd beaten Forest and Luton at home, they would be exactly where they were points tally. That would be par for last season. So despite all the difficulties, despite all the talk of crisis over the last couple of months and the injuries and the fatigue and the problems tactically, Newcastle are not that far off where they have been over the last 18 months. So it's a really good performance. Could really turn up to be a big springboard for the rest of the season, especially if Alexander Isak comes back and Callum Wilson's injury isn't too serious and Anthony Gordon can stay fit. But this is all about Bruno. What a performance by him. It shows that he is absolutely phenomenal. One of the best players in the world. Newcastle are very, very lucky to have him. Thank you very much for joining me for this review. Please like, share and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.